I live in the state of Illinois. It's governed now by a socialist governor. I think he's socialist. He's so far left, if you don't watch it, he'll probably fall over. But he's got his little minorities up there in Chicagoland holding them up. That's where he gets all his power from. They're all socialist up there in that Chicagoland. And they hold us Republicans down here in the central and southern part of Illinois, except for maybe some of the larger cities in that area, which are mostly money tit sucking minorities off the governor and all the Democrats in Illinois. They are so socialist, it's unbelievable what's happening in the United States of America. Anyway, the governor today tweeted that it was Lincoln's wish that there would not be any slavery or anything like that. He would find it abhorrent that what DuQuoin State Fair in DuQuoin, Illinois, they have denied Confederate Railroad, the band, from playing at their state fair because of the word Confederate. And this to show you how ignorant the governor of Illinois is. He called the battle flag of the Confederate Army the Confederate flag. Well, these leftist socialists, I don't see how they can breathe with their head up their backside. Anybody knows their history know that the bars and the stars are actually the battle flag of the Confederate Army. Well, anyway, I just wanted to read this. I give History.com all the credit for this information here. And number one, Lincoln wasn't an abolitionist. Abraham Lincoln did believe that slavery was morally wrong, but there was one big problem. It was sanctioned by the highest law in the land, the Constitution. The nation's founding fathers, who also struggled with how to address slavery, did not implicitly write the word slavery in the Constitution. But they did exclude key clauses protecting the institution, including Fugitive Slave Clause and the 3/5 Clause, which allowed southern states to count slaves for the purpose of representation in the federal government. In a 3-hour speech in Peoria, Illinois, in the fall of 1854, Lincoln presented more clearly than ever his moral, legal, and economic opposition to slavery, and then admitted he didn't know exactly what should be done about it within the current political system. Abolitionists, by contrast, knew exactly what should be done about it. Slavery should be immediately abolished, and freed slaves should be incorporated as equal members of society. They didn't care about working within the existing political system or under the Constitution, which they saw as unjustly protecting slavery and slave owners. Leading abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison called the Constitution a covenant with death and an agreement with hell, and went so far as to burn a copy at the Massachusetts rally in 1854. Though Lincoln saw himself as working alongside the abolitionists on behalf of common anti-slavery cause, he did not count himself among them. Only with emancipation and with his support of the eventual 13th Amendment would Lincoln finally win over the most committed abolitionists. Number two, Lincoln didn't believe blacks should have the same rights as whites. Though Lincoln argued that the Founding Fathers' phrase, all men are created equal, applied to blacks and whites alike, this did not mean he thought they should have the same social and political rights. His views became clear during an 1858 series of debates with his opponent in the Illinois race for U.S. Senate, Stephen Douglas, who had accused him of supporting Negro equality. In their fourth debate at Charleston, Illinois on September 18, 1858, Lincoln made his position clear. I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. He began going on to say that he opposed blacks having the right to vote, to serve on juries, to hold office and to intermarry with whites. What he did believe was that, like all men, blacks had the right to improve their condition in society and to enjoy the fruits of their labor. In this way, they were equal to white men, and for this reason, slavery was inherently unjust. Like his views on emancipation, Lincoln's position on social and political equality for African Americans would evolve over the course of his presidency. In the last speech of his life, delivered on April 11, 1865, he argued for limited black suffrage, saying that any black man who had served the Union during the Civil War should have the right to vote. Number 3, Lincoln thought colonization could resolve the issue of slavery. For much of his career, Lincoln believed that colonization, or the ideal that a majority of African American population should leave the United States and settle in Africa or Central America, was the best way to confront the problem of slavery. His two great political heroes, Henry Clay and Thomas Jefferson, had both favored colonization. Both were slave owners, and who took issue with aspects of slavery but saw no way that blacks and whites could live together peacefully. Lincoln first publicly advocated for colonization in 1852 and in 1854 said that his first instinct would be to free all the slaves and send them to Liberia, the African state founded by the American Colonization Society in 1821. Nearly a decade later, even as he edited the draft of the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, in August of 1862, Lincoln hosted a delegation of freed slaves at the White House in the hopes of getting their support on a plan for colonization in Central America. Given the differences between the two races and the hostile attitudes of the whites towards blacks, Lincoln argued it would be better off for us both, therefore, to be separated. Lincoln's support of colonization provoked greater anger among black leaders and abolitionists, who argued that African Americans were as much natives of the country as whites, and thus deserved the same rights. After he issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln never again publicly mentioned colonization, and mention of it an earlier draft was deleted by the time the final proclamation was issued in January of 1863. Number 4, emancipation was a military policy. As much as he hated the institution of slavery, Lincoln didn't see the Civil War as a struggle to free the nation's 4 million slaves from bondage. Emancipation, when it came, would have to be gradual, and the important thing to do was to prevent the Southern Rebellion from severing the Union permanently in two. But as the Civil War entered its second summer in 1862, thousands of slaves have fled Southern plantations to Union lines, and the federal government didn't have a clear policy on how to deal with them. Emancipation, Lincoln saw, would further undermine the Confederacy while providing the Union with a new source of manpower to crush the rebellion. In July 1862, the President presented his draft of the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation to his cabinet. Secretary of State William Seward urged him to wait until things were going better for the Union on the field of battle, or emancipation might look like the last gasp of a nation on the brink of defeat. Lincoln agreed and returned to edit the draft over the summer. On September 17th, the bloody Battle of Antietam gave Lincoln the opportunity he needed. He issued the preliminary proclamation to his cabinet on September 22nd, and it was published the following day. As a cheering crowd gathered at the White House, Lincoln addressed them from a balcony. "I can only trust in God. I have made no mistake. It is now for the country and the world to pass judgment on it." Number 5. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't actually free all the slaves. Since Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation as a military measure, it didn't apply to the border states like Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, all which were loyal to the Union. Missouri actually had 2 competing governments, one loyal to and recognized by the Union, and one loyal to the Confederacy. Lincoln also exempted selected areas of the Confederacy that had already come under Union control in hopes of gaining the loyalty of whites in those states. In practice, then, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't immediately free a single slave, as the only places that applied were places where the federal government had no control. The southern states currently fighting against the Union. Despite its limitation, Lincoln's proclamation marked a crucial turning point in the evolution of Lincoln's views on slavery, as well as a turning point in the Civil War itself. By the war's end, some 200,000 black men would serve in the Union Army and Navy, striking a mortal blow against the institution of slavery and paving the way for its eventual abolition by the 13th Amendment. Access, so there you go. That's definitely History.com. I recognize them as a source. I hope they let me keep this on here. My whole point is, Governor Pritzker, you need to study your history. And as far as quoting Abraham Lincoln as wanting to get rid of the Confederate flag if he was still alive down at DuQuoin State Fair because the band Confederate Railroad wanted to play there, I think you just don't know what you're talking about. You're this billionaire that's buying votes. Nobody downstate really wanted you, and we still don't want you. A lot of us just wish Chicago would succeed from Illinois, become the 51st state, a district or something. We just really can't stand Chicago. It's corrupt. It's shootings all the time. This here recently over the 4th of July weekend, they had like 5 deaths and 65 shootings within a matter of 3 days. Come on. We're not losing that many over in Afghanistan. So you need to do your history study there, Governor Pritzker. And you could probably figure out by now I didn't vote for you. I don't like you. I think you were in cahoots with Bagliovich. And he's about as crooked as a snake crawls. And the only reason you got voted governor because you got all your whiny tit-sucking minorities up there in Chicago. And you just pardon the pun, trump us on voting. And I hope you read this. And by the way, this was paid for by the blood of brave Americans that served in the military, and the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which is known as freedom of speech. And you probably don't understand that concept being a socialist. And did you know that the communists in the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, or is that the Socialist Soviet Republics? Hear that word, socialism? And also, did you know that the Nazis had socialism in their acronym? And Hitler would have loved you the way you signed the bill to kill the unborn so readily to extend it. You got to be the abortion king. You're a socialist, man. You would rather control all of Illinois, every last thing we do, taxes to death, anything that you can't tax you don't like. And your socialism is only as good as long as you got somebody to tax to death. But let me make this perfectly clear and sum up. Downstate don't like you, Governor Pritzker. A lot of us just look at you and all we see is a big Chicago-style city boss. That's all we see. This is the dog. Over now.